So what makes the Srimad Bhagavad Gita special is because it is a song. And the song should uplift our hearts. So that's the first thing. Any scripture should do that to us. There's a lot of debate what constitutes scripture now. Whether scripture is a traditional history of peoples conquering other races, as we have in some scriptures, mixed in with proverbs, poetry, a number of different things, mythology, as well as some inspiring things. So we have to try and find out what is our central purpose in life and what is the thing that we are suffering from. So the last time we met, we highlighted Arjun's problem is really the problem of a lack of viveka, a lack of deciphering and discerning what is real and everlasting, what is shaky, changing, mutable, things which are here today, gone tomorrow, things that belong to space and time. That pretty much includes every part of our world that we know. And so, how to adjust that? From when we are very small, we are preconditioned to understand things from our own individual way. And then we surround ourselves with possessions that we equally identify with ourselves. So that if a person is wealthy and they lose all their wealth, they say, my whole life is over. Or if a person loses a member of a family, has a bereavement, my whole life is over. Or somebody, unfortunately, gets tied up in some kind of accident somewhere, loses mobility, my whole life is over. Not understanding that what we call human body is nothing more than a piece of clothing. We don't think of it that way. So strongly do identify with it that we cover ourselves up with this misunderstanding, and that's what's happened typically to Arjuna. So what are we starting from? Our starting point is a starting point of glory, not a starting point of deficiency, but that glory is covered. It's covered with layers of ignorance. Ignorance means we revalue everything around the central feature of self-interest. And as I say, we did from very young. At the end of March, around about there, I hope to hold this introductory course to the Vedanta and Sankhya through Enneagram and Essence of Truth. Is a convenient way of starting a process in spiritual life because it deals with this personalized aspect of what we call I. And we all start off with this. We mistake this understanding, I exist, for I, the body, exists, but it doesn't. And even as we speak, we find cells are being replaced and renewed by a process of meiosis. That is the whole internal structure of a cell gets disassembled, reconstructed, replaced. And so that after so many years, 7 years, the whole body is renewed. This we covered a while ago. But we can't say that we are a static entity, born at this year dot, died at this year dot. And the Vedanta doesn't say that. It says that you're going to view the body as a kind of earth car which is there, which when it gets a chest complaint or something, or somehow goes defective, what Ramakrishna calls the rent for a body, then we can realize either that it is ourselves or that it is something, some instrumental thing, which is internally recovering And its internal recovery is nothing to do with us. Our breathing, nothing to do with us. We don't identify ourselves as, I am a breather. So, nice to meet you. Who are you? What do you do? I'm a breather. We don't put it that way. Or we don't say, I'm a pump. The heart pumps. We use the subjective language with every single instrument and faculty that we find in the body. But collectively, we have a problem. Collectively, we think that this whole thing is somehow I. And we get so strongly attached to it, we lose our perspective. We lose our clarity. And we have to remind ourselves, as I mentioned previously, Arjuna was not unaware of this philosophy or these philosophical principles. Arjuna was fully aware of them, but he forgot. What are we suffering from? Forgetfulness. So there's an old story like that. Some variations are there. Some people say Vishnu. Others say Indra. You can take your pick. Let's say Vishnu. Vishnu came down and manifested to destroy a monster in the shape of a boar. Having done that, he saw he had to himself take the body of a pig, a male pig, boar. Now, during that state, he got so convinced that of his animal status. You have a discussion with a materialist atheist, you'll say, oh, we are nothing but animals. That's it, nothing more. Then why not behave like animals? That's the difficulty, the ethical difficulty with humans. But people don't normally think it's appropriate to behave like pigs and sniff the ground, and eat anything. Pigs are not very selective in what they eat. And I hazard a guess many people over Christmas were not very selective about what they ate either. But this is not your body. It does not belong to you. It belongs, in the language of the Gita and Upanishads, to Atman, that internal divine self. It is an 11-gated city. And it doesn't belong to you. It belongs to that Ajna, that unborn, undying one, whose consciousness is unflickering. Everything else is flickering. But that consciousness is unflickering. And we should do everything justice by attributing things in the correct way. No, I don't breathe. I can witness the diaphragm muscle moving up and down. That has a certain steadying effect. I can witness the comings and goings in a field that we call mind. I can witness how my ankle feels, and I can put all my concentrated attention into that one thing until I feel every sensation being picked up through that area. We call concentration. Selecting one particular area and putting all your attention there and picking up every single sensation there. Sooner or later, there's a dissection, a kind of disassociation that says, I am not the thing I am observing. I'm not the thing that I'm witnessing. I am an eternal knower, thinker, witness in one. That has to come. When that comes habitually, we no longer have any problems. We have knowledge. The antidote for ignorance is knowledge. But this is not knowledge from books. Then when I be studying the Bhagavad Gita, we're studying it as a kind of guideline for practical life. So we're not talking of philosophy, dry philosophy, that competes with Kant, or any of the Western philosophers. We are thinking of philosophy in its original context as love of wisdom, and we'll add love of inner wisdom, a kind of attunement to our own divine origin, a sense of getting there and catching a moment of poise, making that habitual until we become steady. Gita's language for it is steady wisdom, sthita prajna. And later on in the chapter, second chapter, we find there's a great description, because the question is asked, how does a person walk? How do they talk? What are their characteristics? I was giving a talk somewhere. We were talking about the relationship between, we were talking in the context of Sister Nudita, the relationship between guru and student. And the student will find it very easy to follow any spiritual practice by following exactly the guru. I was telling how Swami Nisrasananda, whose teacher was Mahapurush Maharaj, Swami Shivananda, direct disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, how he used to take care when he walked. And how he used to tell me when he walked down the stairway, he would do exactly as his guru had been doing. Because he was interested. How does an enlightened person, how do they walk? What do they say? What do they think? What was their wiring that made them special, unusual, and internally magnetic? You get the idea. So that question is asked toward the end more. But we'll pick this Bhagavad Gita up from the clues that I've just given. And the text we can begin with is almost where we left off. So as part of this discerning attitude, we have to see na jayate mriyati va kadachin. Those who are following it, there are 20. Now I don't know if we went back, but I don't worry, because we need to repeat many of these concepts. In the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads, many concepts are repeated, almost ad nauseum. But that's because of our forgetfulness. When we pick it up and learn that we should, that we oft times forget. What is all our suffering from? This avidya, another way of saying forgetfulness of our own divine origin. When we get attuned into that perpetually, we don't have to seek any strength. And we become knowledgeable by this definition, that knowledge is the cessation of necessity to repeat. I'll give you an example. Presumably you got up in the morning. Again, don't take credit for it, but we'll put it in that language. And then what happened was, you didn't have to, as you woke up and gave a yawn, repeat your name 300 times. It's not something that gets depleted. You sign 1,000 checks, you have to repeat your name 1,000 times to fill up again. It doesn't happen like that. Having known it, you don't have to repeat it anymore. But the process of repetition is part and parcel of getting that knowledge. This is called practice. So practice and discernment, or practice and discrimination, or practice and dissociation, or practice and detachment. These are the two aspects of spiritual practice, but it has to be steady. You can't be erratic about it. You want any success in any endeavor in life, you cannot be erratic. Many of these things I would have repeated previously. So, Dayam bhuta bhavita va na bhuyaha ajo nityaha shashvato yam purano na hunyate hanya mane sharire. The Atman is neither born nor does it die. We are used to things being born and things dying. We're used to galaxies being born and galaxies dying. We're used to cells being born and cells dying. Even though we're not aware of it, biology tells us about it. But we are aware of things around us. We're aware that in summer, leaves are on a tree, and in winter, they're gone. And there are intermediate stages. The fall is there, and then you'll find on the other side, you'll find new leaves beginning. So we witness it, if we're observant enough, with every aspect of life. Birth, life, and death should be no surprise to us. We should not grieve. Coming into being and ceasing do not take place in it. You say, when did this universe begin? Was it with a big bang or a small bang or whatever it was? No. It came and went and will never end. It goes on perpetually. It was born, it will live, and it will die. Either totally or in sections. We're not sure. Personally, Vivekananda thought it would be in sections. Unborn, that is ajaha, unborn, eternal, constant, and ancient. Compared now to what we're used to. Things are born. Things are not, things are time-bound. They're not eternal. Things are finite. Things are not constant. They're always changing. In fact, the saying is, the most reliable, steady constant is change. And ancient. Ancient meaning it has no time, Purana, no time. It is ancient. Whenever you think of something that is ancient, it is more ancient. You'll never get to an end of it. So infinite. And it is not killed when the body is slain. That is, when anybody dies, that person, see the expression we use, die. And we soften the blow by saying, they passed away. Is a way of buffering our own sorrow. No, the body left, finished. A piece of clothing went off. Another piece of clothing comes on. Now this is the whole principle that some people erroneously call reincarnation, but there's a reason for it. And if I haven't covered it before, I'll cover it now. You see, we have several alternatives. Theology in some religions will say that the soul, whatever that is the life monad, is inserted at one point, that is born, and then goes on forever. But in one of Swami Vivekananda's lectures on Karma Yoga, he very clearly says, if it's infinite, it was always infinite. You can't have something beginning and then going on infinitely. That's the difficulty with that argument. If you want to have it for a convenience sake, that's okay. But for accuracy's sake, it doesn't make any sense. Or you can say, we don't believe that there is any entity at all that is constant. We're atheistic about it, or at least agnostic about it. So we think everything changes, and death is the end, finished, we snuff everything out. But that doesn't make any sense philosophically. It doesn't make any sense experientially through meditation, that when you come to that position of oneness, that constant, and make that discovery, is very clear that that is pure consciousness, that is neither born, nor does it come, nor does it go. So something is there. And when you do an analysis and go back, what is the thing that never changes? Go through every multiple field, you come to that one position, fixed position, that says, I can't go no further, this is my final datum. This particular datum is the place where I witness. That is the knower, thinker, witness all in one. And I cannot go anywhere beyond. I can witness all the events in the multiple fields, the totality of multiple fields, one after the other, and go back one section at a time and find out what is the witness of this particular field. What is the witness of the senses? All our knowledge comes through the senses, that is through the skin. All our instruments of perception are situated on our membrane called skin. So recently we discovered there's such a thing as epigenetics. Biology was very clever, very astute, and very skilled at finding out what is nature biologically. But they didn't completely fill the picture. What about nurture? Everybody knew that there was such a thing. Identical twins being born will have different personalities. What's the effect of the environment? Let's analyze that. So studies have been done typically on twins, identical twins being brought up in different localities, and comparing the notes and finding that their whole personality and behavior and characteristics are different. even though genetically they are identical. And then, of course, studies have been done on father twins, that is, non-identical twins, to see what is the comparison of that and so on. So quite clearly, there's something that impacts us from the outside. But all of this is simply to make a body function, a machine function, for the purpose of something else. Rule in philosophy is something made from parts is not for the good of its own. It's for the good of another. And with this we covered previously also, I'm sure. So if you have a car, it's not because the car is happy to be a car and wants to take an independent trip to Galway. No, a car is there so that it can facilitate you to drive it. And even when you arrive in Galway, it will not thank you. Coming back to our story, there was Vishnu thinking that he was a pig, happy that he was a pig, shoveling everything in as pigs do, making piglets, enjoying the muck and the filth of the sty, very happy. And then the gods, the deities, were concerned. We want our Vishnu back. Who will govern the universe? Who will keep things sustained? We're in trouble. Now, naturally, when any difficulty such as this arises, they call on Shiva, the last resort, because he's kind of the divine hippie. Nobody really wants to call on him, but he's compassionate. He saved the world. So he comes along. And with his trident, he pierces the body of Vishnu. It liberates Vishnu. He points out, where was I? I forgot. I came down, I did this, and then I completely forgot what happened to me. Lapse of memory. Then they pointed out his life. This is what you did. This is Mrs. Pig. These are the piglets you have. This is the food you ate. Oh my goodness, how could I be so deluded? This is the situation we are all in. So that is why earlier on, the wise do not grieve, either for the living or the dead. Why? It seems hard-hearted. Somebody dies, you get invited to the funeral, you go there, there's an Irish custom there, you go for whatever it is, invited back for things to eat. I don't know why people want to eat, but obviously people get hungry when people die, so that's fine. And that's the wake. A good spirit is there, you see. Prop up Uncle Fred in the corner, whatever it is, toast him and so on and so forth. Despite knowing this impermanence of the body, they're still lamenting. In Africa, they have a very, very good custom that takes psychological care of this. They allow temporary grieving, but it is very, very loud, very, very expressive. No inhibition whatsoever. And you'll find in every disappointment, all these things arise. Denial, I cannot be in this situation. I don't want to be in this situation. Guilt. It's my fault that this situation arose. Anger. All of these things that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, a specialist in bereavement, would go through. But the wise people never grieve whatsoever, not because they're heartless, but because why would you grieve? Why would you grieve for the fact that a person's journey is disrupted because of an inadequate tooling, instrumentation, in exchange for a much better one, driven by all the desires and impetus and psychological baggage that moves everything along. That's the whole point of evolution in the yogic sense. An internal drive, meaning that evolution must have an attractor, like gravity. Like if you take a ball on a hill and release it, despite the fact that there may be irregularities, it'll find its way to a rest position at the bottom. It has to do it. In the same way, we're moving towards that central goal, unfolding ourselves toward it. That's the whole idea. And so, there's no reason for you to be attached either to the body or to actions associated with the body, what we call karma. And verse 21 is about that. Sri Ramakrishna's comment, before I read it out. Absorbed as a saint he was passing along a crowded street. Then, by chance, he trampled upon the foot of a wicked man. The ruffian became enraged and recklessly assaulted the holy man until he fainted and fell down. He was forthwith carried to the ashram and tenderly nursed by his disciples. When he regained consciousness, he was asked if he could recognize the one attending him. Ah, yes, he said, the hand that beat up this body is now nursing it, came the reply. The knower of Brahman, the supreme reality, distinguishes not the assaulter from the assaulted. And so, Veda vinashinam nityam yainam ajam avyayam katam sa purusha partha kam gathayati kanti hanti ham. He who recognizes the Atman as indestructible, eternal, unborn, and changeless, how can he slay or cause another to slay? He's not the doer. And the Atman itself is the real entity. That Atman you can never destroy. He will say this a number of times over and over again, and we ourselves in studying this must say it over and over again. So, eternal, unborn, and changeless, how can he slay or cause another to slay? Because the Atman has no action in it. The knower of the Atman is free from any association with the instrument. Now we go on to the next one, which says it much more beautifully, because it compares the human body to a set of clothes. And because of its importance, the stanza rhythm changes a little bit. Vashamshi chirnani yata vihaya navani granati danu parani tata sharirani vihaya chirnani anyani samyati navani dihi. See, as a man casting off worn-out garments puts on new ones, they're all worn out, put a new one. So the embodied one, casting off worn-out bodies, enters into others that are new. So we're left with those three options. I didn't mention the third. First option is, the soul was inserted one moment. Atman, born, goes on infinitely. Can't be. Secondly, there's no Atman. That also can't be. Thirdly, Atman is always there, but the covering is also there. And until the covering goes, until there's a momentum stops, ceases, then we'll continue and continue and continue. And that is why the goal in this system is not salvation. The goal in this system is not going from a minus to a plus. The goal in this system is to discover your own fullness and existent glory that is already there and never changes. So rebirth of the embodiment is mentioned as a man casting off worn-out garments puts on new ones, so the embodied casting off worn-out bodies enters into others that are new. So even so, what we call Jivatman, now there's always a confusion of terms which people ask me about. What is the difference between Atman, Jiva, Jivatman, and so on? Well, we have to look at the body as layers, not just one thing. A number of bodies sewn up together. Outside is a physical body made from food. And for this we have to rely on Taittiriya Upanishad, which tells us about koshas, that is sheaths, like Russian dolls. You take the outer layer off, there's another inner one. Take the other one off, another one is. Well, you go on like that until there's nothing, or at least a very tiny doll. So you can imagine it like that this physical body is there, but when the physical body goes, all the cumulative rest remains. This is called jiva. It doesn't go away. Information cannot be lost. But then that serves as a momentum to get another material avenue, taxi if you will, to continue the journey. In some example I may have given you before, the taxi goes on the way to the airport, unfortunately breaks down. You don't give up and say there's the end of it. You take another taxi and transfer your psychological baggage across and continue your journey. Simple. So even so, the Jivatman mentally assumes a new form before dissociating himself from the old body. That's an interesting insight into what happens. It's not that he's left with a blank, and is described in the Kathopanishad like a caterpillar grabbing on to one thing here before it releases the other, like that. Catching hold of the one body before releasing the other, allowing a continuum, creating a link, a chain, not severing anything. In other words, his mental makeup does not die along with the gross body, that remains. And this is called Sukshma Sharira, subtle body. And it persists with all its tendencies. And a child is born, it's not born rasa tabula, it's born with a personality. Every mother can see it. So Sri Ramakrishna makes this comment, the snake and its slough are not one and the same. Even so, the Atman and the body are different, one from the other. Now the next few stanzas deal with subject of this whole understanding of Atman. We've dealt with one side, what is the body? Now on the other side, what are the characteristics of Atman? Nainam chindanti shastrani nainam dahati bhavakaha nachainam kledayantya apo na shoshati marutaha. Weapons do not cleave it. Why is he putting it like that? Because he's in a field and the weapons will cut a body into two, but weapons will not cut it. Put it in a modern context. When you go for an operation, you cut your leg off, you put it in a bucket, you say goodbye to it, it goes off, it didn't affect you in any way, essentially. You don't say 1/4 of me is gone. Fire burns it not. In warfare, you will find fire, isn't it? Even in modern warfare, you hit a missile somewhere, and you'll get a fire from it. People will burn. But the Atman, no. What puts a fire out? Water. Well, water cannot wet it. And then wind dries it not. If you take any of the elements that we find in life, we find that the Atman is not affected by any of them. The body alone is affected by them. The Atman remains unaffected by mundane things. Pleasure and pain, virtue and vice, dual states such as these do not have sway on it, but they affect the person identified with the body. Smoke tarnishes the walls, but not the space within them, says Sri Ramakrishna. You see, the weapons that are being used in any event in warfare, they're different. They're all part and parcel of all the elements that make up our familiar world. We can classify into 5 sections, coming out as gross elements, and 5 organs that catch it, and 5 organs that relate to it. Achedyo yam adahyo yam akledyo shoshai evacha nityaha sarvakataha sthanuha achalo yam Sanatanaha. The self, this Atman, is uncleavable, incombustible, neither wet nor dried. It's eternal, all-pervading, stable, immovable, everlasting. Do you think we've said this before? Many times. Why should we repeat it? Because of its importance. And when we repeat this time and time and time again, maybe we'll catch on to this idea. Now, being eternal, of course, this Atman is also all-pervading. It's not that it is somewhere stitched up inside. It's not captured like a bird in a gilded cage. So we have to understand. Misery is an unwanted state of mind, got into through ignorance. Shreyas is not where misery is. That is the good life, the perfect life. The Lord throws light on the glory of the Atman. Why? In order to cure all of us of the despondency meaninglessly assumed by him. Will this be a panacea for us? No. Will we always forget? Yes. Will we have ups and downs? Yeah. Will we be elated and miserable? Yes. That's why we have to repeat the lesson. And nature is a good mother. Nature teaches us these lessons almost ruthlessly, but if you don't want your child to put their hand in the fire, you'll have to snatch it out. You can't just say, let me give you freedom. I think today there's a bit difficulty in parents with asking a child, do you want this or do you want that? A child will naturally respond, I want this. They might change their mind tomorrow. Then they get used to it. When they don't get this instead of that, they have a tantrum. So, we have these ups and downs, there's no doubt. But this is all cured by understanding that there's this one Atman, steady, steady, steady. So far, we never mentioned or inserted the word God. But later we'll discover, instead of saying Atman, we can also say God. Avyakto yam achintyo yam avikaryo yam uchati tasmadevam viditvainam na no shochitum arhasi. This Atman is said to be. This is a very interesting way of putting things in scripture. I'm not saying it. It is said to be impersonal. In other words, it has authority from others. Said to be unmanifested, unthinkable, and immutable. We know it's unmanifested, but did we know it was unthinkable? People say, if you cannot think of it, it can't exist. Yeah, well, it's unthinkable. If it were to be unthinkable, if it were to be thinkable, then it would fall into the realm of the other two. It would be manifest and it would be changeable. Therefore, knowing, understanding, imbibing it, eating, drinking, sleeping it, allowing it to saturate every pore of your being, knowing this, you should not grieve. There's no reason to grieve. What reason would there be? So Atman cannot be perceived by any of the senses, and whatever does not come within the ken or the range of the senses is necessarily unmanifested. And it's very hard to conceive, there's no doubt, of a thing that cannot be perceived. So the Atman is therefore said to be unthinkable. Now the four elements, I won't go into those too much, but in order to understand the Vedanta philosophy, we have to understand the subtle elements, tanmatras. If we don't understand that, we don't understand anything about Vedanta. In fact, we'll find that I think it is in the Vakra Samhita, if you understand these tanmatras, then all your grief will be gone. So there are seen to be undergoing modifications. Seem to be undergoing modifications. We don't really know it or relate to it. But future generations will not be worried or concerned about Newtonian physics, general relativity, none of these things. They'll all be operating from the weird world of quantum physics, which is itself unthinkable. Is it possible for an object to exist in multiple places simultaneously? According to quantum mechanics, yes. Is it possible that a tiny, tiny atomic particle can suddenly go through a stubborn and almost impossible blockage? It's possible. Like a human walking through the wall, but at a smaller scale. Yes, possible. Quantum mechanics allows it. We get the heat from the sun. Why? Because of what we call tunneling, quantum tunneling. Hydrogen atom, another hydrogen atom, plus, plus. How do they link together? They'll resist each other, isn't it? Likes repel. So what is their trick? They bypass the impossible and fuse. It is this quantum tunneling that makes for the fusion that creates the helium and the radiation of the sun and all the energy that radiates toward us, on which all of life depends. Is it possible that by affecting an engaged particle to engaged particle, they're affecting the one, such as spin, the other one can immediately correspond, immediately without locality, that means without agency or travel, no matter how far apart they are? Quantum mechanics says yes. Our common sense says no. Our gut says no. But all of these things seemingly were known before all of this. So it is not an impossibility. It's not an impossibility for things to be unmanifest, unthinkable, and immutable, just even in the normal, so-called normal world. The fact that we can't perceive these things by the senses does not mean that they don't exist. And all these tanmatras relate to the subtle energy levels that we have picked up somehow in quantum mechanics. What is Brahman like, says Sri Ramakrishna, cannot be defined with words. One may be called upon to explain what the ocean is like to a person who has never seen it. The expounder can at best say he's a vast sheet of water, and so defining Brahman is much more difficult. Now, supposing you're skeptical about that, atachainam nitya jatam nityam va manyase mritam tatapi tvam habhavu nainam shoshitam arhasi. Supposing you conceive of Atman as given to constant births and deaths, supposing you don't buy into the fact because you haven't had that mystic knowledge, or you don't believe the testimony of the ancients, or you haven't made the necessary analysis, supposing you conceive that what we call the self is really the psychophysical self, and you conceive of this Atman or self as given to constant births and deaths, even then, says Krishna, you should not give way to grief. That there is nothing permanent is a view also of materialists. We all agree on this, that everything in the material world is not permanent. And so why should you grieve if there is an entity that is subject to this impermanence? Birth, life, death, birth, life, death, supposing there's no afterlife. Why should you grieve? Nature itself is doing that job. So granting that this view is true, even then there's no ground for grieving. A man given being given to theism, atheism, agnosticism, materialism, or any other belief is not of much consequence in this argument. So irrespective of what you believe, you must be freed from sorrowing, because what will you gain? Something that you cannot change, no point in grieving over. You have to accept it. My old example is like this. An old lady on a bus clinging to the rail with a distorted face like a gargoyle will not make the bus go faster. It'll just increase their heart rate and they might get a thrombosis. So purely on the grounds of reasoning, just logic, there's no reason to grieve. Death is certain of that which is born. Birth is certain of that which is dead. You should not therefore lament over the inevitable. If it doesn't happen today, it'll happen tomorrow. We don't know. We'll just continue very briefly and we'll revisit next week. So, Avyaktadini Bhutani Yakta Madhyani Bharata Avyaktani Dhananya Eva Tatra Ka Paridevana. Beings are all of Bharata, unmanifest in their origin, manifest in their middle state, and unmanifest again in the end. What is the point then of the anguish? And then, of course, we started a brand new theme with it, that the Atman transcends not only mind but speech. So far we have covered the mutability, the changeability, and mortality of the human body, which should come as no surprise. And yet it does. See the level of ignorance which is there. And everything associated with the body, we grieve over. Lose a bank account, we grieve over that. Lose a property, we grieve over that. Lose an income, we grieve over that. Lose a relative, we grieve over that. Lose a favorite piece of clothing, we grieve over that. Especially if you're a miser. Lose a favorite book, we grieve over that. And so it goes on. So we'll see how this Atman has been viewed or is being viewed from different points of view. Don't forget, this is beyond mind and speech, and yet has to be expressed somehow. How do we express something that is beyond the range of our expression? This will come on to next week. I might linger for questions if you have, but we have five minutes.
You mentioned there about a suit of clothes is cast off and a new one is put on. You said something about what actually is not cast off and is taken on to wear the next suit of clothes.
Yeah.
Now, I just missed, I don't know how deeply you went into that, but could you just maybe say a bit more?
Think of the body, and this is covered in the Tiri Upanishad, as 5 koshas or sheaths. Mm-hmm. So I mentioned it in a different language as like an onion, or like Russian dolls or something. One layer can be built up, another layer. So sheaths is a very good way of putting it. You imagine now something with 5 coverings. Mm-hmm. We know the materiality of each one. But the only thing that's lost to us, what we call death, is that body which is made from yesterday's tomatoes and pasta. Yeah?
Yeah.
So that's the only thing that's lost to us.
And how big is that in the scale of existence?
We can't quantify it, but you think it's everything. We think it's everything, otherwise if we didn't, we wouldn't grieve. Mm-hmm. So when somebody dies, our whole world is lost.
Everything's gone.
Everything is gone. Don't forget, to the person dying, it's more. One person is dying, they're losing everything. They're losing their bank account, their family home, their loved ones, everything, isn't it? But who's to say, you see, that when somebody dies, it's a tragedy. Only a tragedy for us, not a tragedy for the person. And we say dying, we have to put this in inverted commas, it's the body that dies. The body is made of just organic material and converted into organic material again, which we call a body.
And then what's left is chitta, manas,
What-
chitta,
Yes.
ahankara, isn't it?
Yes. So you can say, in short, what we have is the sukshma sharira, that is mind. It is the mind, including unconscious mind, that carrying all your baggage, all your psychological impetus, including all your unfulfilled desires, and all the things that you have to accomplish because you already packed the bag.
So the baggage is taken with you, basically.
Yeah.
Good or bad,
What Vedanta suggests is, instead of packing your bags for a return trip, why don't you pack for a one-way trip? This is called moksha. Why do you want to come back? Save up your whole life, go on holiday, and then that holiday is finished, and then you come back. So in this system, the reward, ultimately we have to come back anyway, because it's the only equipment we can get, this freedom. It's the only suitable one equipped. It has a brain, suitable for analyzing, suitable for feeling. We can steer all these energies toward, in religion, toward God, or in philosophy, toward truth. So take all your energies. So what are the energies doing all along? They're being diversified. This is called delaying tactics. We can delay as much as we want. It's up to you. There's no moral judgment in it. Delay as long as you want. But it's a little foolish, because delay means pain. You go through the same painful process. Arjuna is going through this pain of despondency. You're going through a bereavement process ahead of the process, and realizing he is going to cause destruction, principally to two people, Drona and Bhishma.
Whether Arjuna likes it or not. Yeah.
Well, you see, so what is ultimately, what should we be doing? How can we dissociate all activities from this? We do every action in this current moment without any worry about, will it be a plus, will it be a minus, will it be a success, will it be a failure, will there be a result at the end, will there not be? We're just doing it in such a way that our full concentration is there in that unit activity.
Dedicated to God. Yeah.
Yeah, but also being efficient. So later we'll find what is yoga. Efficiency in action. Skill in action. If you're inefficient in any context, if you're inefficient in your business, if you're not a good time manager in your business and don't have a regular routine in your whole life, that is, if you have a lack of rhythm necessary, then what will happen? Your life will be pell-mell, be up and down. It'll be a life of confusion. So these are all delaying tactics, which gives us pain. It gives us ups and downs. Pain followed by pleasure. What we deem as something that is pleasurable, we found out later is pain. Ask a small child, what is your ideal heaven? Oh, a ton of ice cream. Very good. Herewith a ton. Please eat. After a few mouthfuls, they say, no, I'm tired of that. I want something else. Or if they eat a ton, God bless their stomach, they'll get pain from it. So we're never fully satisfied when we operate on the sense level, that is the body level. But that passes on to the subconscious mind or unconscious mind. The unconscious mind is the mind that has the pulling power. And how do you control the unconscious mind? You can never do it directly. We have to do it through conscious activity. And in this context, constant remembrance of what? Of the principle. I am unborn, I am undying, and so on. All of those things. What about if you're a devotee? Will you have this attitude? You see, don't forget, we are discussing jnana yoga. There's another way of saying, please understand the principle first, and then the practice. But even before that, even before you've chosen your specific route, please understand some fundamental principles. This world is not permanent, and there are no permanent habitats, including that body. So you establish a drive that pushes you toward the next one, like grabbing onto something and then releasing, and then grabbing again and releasing, like that. It doesn't leave you high and dry. Your very experience drives it. Now, this is a very great difference between modern interpretation of biological evolution or even cosmological evolution and the evolution as understood by the system, the yogis. So you'll find in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, good and bad deeds are not the direct causes of transformations. They're simply, we're not starting from a negative and going to a positive. There's no, I am a sinner, and now I have to correct it, and my efforts are not going to be good, so I need some assistance and I need saving. No, let me save myself. If I have to be saved, let me do it myself. From what? Well, in this context, the only thing that you're saved from is saved from pain, a painful experience. Nature, life is painful, but it's designed to be that because Mother Nature is a good teacher. And it teaches us, it gives us many, many opportunities to learn the lessons. We shouldn't complain that they are painful. This universe is made from complete and total unfulfillment and frustration. And we have no business to complain about it. It's the nature of nature itself. And it's in our favor. We just have to know how to control it, how to use it when it's in our favor, and how to resist it when it's not. That's the game of life. But we'll cover all these subjects as we go on. All right. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.